Hello, denizens of the internet. My name is Jeremy Greco, and this is From the Hawk's Eye. This is a new vlog I'm creating so I can talk about some of the things I'm playing, watching, reading, and listening to. Today I'm going to talk about the three primary Dragon Age games. As with most reviews, there will be spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. Dragon Age is a game with huge backstory and all manner of unique political and cultural nuances. Trying to describe all of those would be a video in and of itself. Maybe I'll do that one day. But in the meantime, you should probably play the games before watching this video so you understand the various interplays between communities that I'll be referencing. I don't think there's ever been a game series that's confused me quite so much when I ask myself, do you like this? As Dragon Age. None of the three games are content with mediocrity. At all. Everything in them is either a great success, it's huge, it's wonderful, it's awesome, or it's a horrible failure. There's really no middle ground. I played Dragon Age Origins on the Xbox 360 shortly after it came out. It was, in fact, the first game I bought for my Xbox 360, except for Mass Effect, which I bought the 360 to play, which is another story in and of itself, and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which came with the console I actually ended up buying. The game is good. The story's interesting. The characters are well written and entertaining. The BioWare does their characters very well. I especially loved the interplay between Alistair and Morrigan as I just wandered throughout the world the entire game. There were two huge flaws in Dragon Age from my point of view. Gameplay and player-character interactions. On my first and only playthrough so far, I tried to be a dwarf commoner rogue and I wanted to turn him into an archer. Unfortunately, archery doesn't really work in Dragon Age Origins. It doesn't do enough damage to be useful. So about halfway through, I ended up having to switch to be a dual dagger wielding rogue, which wasn't really what I wanted to do. Also, I found the stamina system I felt was a little bit weak because I was always waiting for more stamina or a cooldown. And the auto attacks it was auto attacks. There was nothing to do. I just sat there and watched and waited and hoped that I was going to do enough damage before I died. But the other problem, as I said, I had with this game was the player interactions. Now, I started the game when I was doing character creation. I gave my character like this really like dour kind of scowling expression because he's a dwarf commoner, like he's really downtrodden. And so I didn't want his portrait to be really happy or anything like that. But then I found as the game went on that was the only expression he ever had. No matter what dialogue options, no matter I seduced Morrigan or I romanced Morrigan, and then there's a scene where she's seducing me and I'm just standing there staring at her, scowling the entire time. And like, now he goes on and goes with the seduction because it's completion of the romance, but he's scowling at her, so that's just kind of weird to me. And then there was the dialogue system. I didn't like it. I guess the silence is supposed to be like you think of the stuff, you think of how you want to say it, and that's how you say it. But that's how it's been explained to me anyway. But the way I feel is that the writers have to write with a certain reaction in mind for the non-player characters, the NPCs. So it doesn't really matter what I think because the NPCs are going to respond as if I'd said it a certain way anyway. So that was really frustrating to me. And I also had a hard time telling, like, with the Mass Effect dialogue system, which was what I was used to at this point, I could tell, like, on the right side was going to be, okay, progress the conversation, move on to the next point. But the left side was going to be get more information. And because of the way they arranged the dialogue system in Dragon Age, it didn't work that way. And I often progressed conversations I didn't want to progress because I wanted more information. I thought, oh, this is going to be a more information option, and it wasn't. So that was very frustrating to me. But overall, Dragon Age Origins, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my one playthrough. I don't know if I'll ever play through it again because the gameplay thing was just so frustrating to me. Also, everything was so dark; it was hard to see. So I don't know if I'll go through and play it again. But it was worth playing through once. And it was good enough that I went ahead and pre-ordered Dragon Age 2. This was also right after I'd finished Mass Effect 2, which I loved. So I was really stoked for more BioWare games. I also saw in the advertisements that the trailers were just so cool, and I saw that the NPC was supposed to have a voice this time, and so I got the game, and I started playing it, and I realized that they'd fixed all of my complaints from the first game. They changed the dialogue system so it looked more like Mass Effect, so I could tell, okay, this is going to be a question, this is going to progress. And then they even added icons in the middle of the little dialogue thing so that I could tell, okay, this is going to be sarcastic, this is going to be really sweet, this is going to be, oh, I'm crying and I'm whiny, this is going to be angry. So that was really cool. And they fixed the combat system so that I wasn't just standing around if I didn't have any mana. I played this game with a human female mage. So if I didn't have any mana, or I was waiting for all my cooldowns, there was still something to do because I had to press the button for my auto attack, which kept me interested. Now, the biggest complaint a lot of people had for this game that I hear is that the environments were really barren. There weren't many of them, and there wasn't a lot to do in them. And that, I mean, it's a fair complaint. I didn't have a problem with it because I was too busy listening to Varric spout off about something, or enjoying the cool auto attack animation for mages. But yeah, so that's a valid complaint. Now, my complaint actually comes in with the ending of the game. So this is spoiler. I'm going to talk about the ending of Dragon Age 2. So if you haven't beaten it, don't keep listening if you care. So basically, Anders goes and blows up the Chantry. Because he's mad about the oppression of mages. Now, as a mage, I was also mad about the oppression of mages, but I also didn't want to start a civil war, and apparently he thought civil war was the only way to deal with this. And the other thing is that he blows up the Chantry, but the head of the Chantry in Kirkwall just was a moderate. She didn't want to oppress all the mages necessarily. It was the Templars, especially Knight Commander Meredith, who were the real problems. So I feel like he attacked the wrong people for no reason. And with no warning. Like, you're just going through and all of a sudden it's like, boom, blew up the Chantry. Okay, why did you do that? And he doesn't really give a good explanation. And so the mages realize that now they've been forced to have this war. There's no choice anymore because the Templars are coming for them because they don't care if Anders did it. They're just going to blame everybody. So the mages are going to fight, and you have to choose a side. I just sided with the mages because I am a mage, and up to this point, the Templars had been kind of oppressive, and the mages hadn't really done anything wrong. I mean, there were some mages that had done things wrong, but they were dealt with. I dealt with them. They were condemned by the mages. The Templars dealt with them. Whatever. Like, they weren't just going around like doing evil things and getting away with it. So then immediately, of course, Orsino, the head of the mages, says, okay, now that we have to fight this war, we have to do everything that we've thought is wrong and evil this entire time. We're going to have to use blood magic. And then he turns into an abomination. And so before I can even deal with the person that I have a problem with, Knight Commander Meredith, I have to kill Orsino and a bunch of mages that are fighting with him. And that was frustrating and confusing, and why did I do that? And then, of course, I went and fought Meredith, and then they had a cliffhanger and said, well, now we gotta go find the hero of Kirkwall, which is who you've been playing this entire time. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the lead-in to Dragon Age 3. just for a moment, let me go back to Dragon Age Origins. It seemed like the lead-in from Dragon Age Origins into Dragon Age 2 was going to be the child that you did or did not have with Morrigan that had the soul of the old god in it. But that isn't even mentioned or hinted at or acknowledged in Dragon Age 2. So that was kind of weird. So then we come to Dragon Age Inquisition. At this point, I had sworn I would never pre-order another BioWare game, because based on primarily the ending of Mass Effect 3, but also kind of the ending of Dragon Age 2, I wasn't convinced that BioWare really knew what they were doing with the writing of the stories anymore. And the story of a video game is the most important part of most video games to me. So I was not going to play it. But they did this really smart thing where they made these awesome trailers with great music that I ended up buying for myself, because the music is just, I love it that much. And then they put them in front of YouTube. They paid YouTube and said, hey, put these in the ads before the videos sometimes. And so I saw the Dragon Age Inquisition trailers, and I'm a sucker for music. That's why I bought Mass Effect. The music was just awesome, and I was like, okay, I'm really pumped, I gotta play this game. So I pre-ordered Dragon Age Inquisition. And it picks up right where Dragon Age 2 leaves off, which is great. But you don't, you're not the hero of Kirkwall. You're not trying to find the champion of Kirkwall. You're just, there's a variety of people you can be, but none of them are that person. I chose again to be a human female mage because I had so much fun with that in Dragon Age 2. And again, BioWare listened. They attempted to address the concerns of people from the last game. And so in this case, everyone said, not enough variety in my environments. So BioWare made a huge game in Dragon Age Inquisition. It's massive. Dragon Age 2 takes place in Kirkwall and the surrounding territory. That's it. Dragon Age Inquisition, however, takes place across all of the southern continent of Thedas. So you're talking 2 different countries, and there's like 11 primary zones within those countries, and then like 10, 12, 14, something like that, subzones. The primary zones are huge. They're all massive. I think that they're all at least as big as Kirkwall was individually. And then there's like 12 of them. They're massive and they're awesome, and there's tons of stuff to do in them. Well, let me get back to where I was going. There was 3 phases for me in Dragon Age Inquisition. The first phase lasted from the beginning of the game till about 5-10 hours in, where I really regretted buying the game. Just regretted it so much. The cutscenes in Dragon Age Inquisition, they use the in-game engine. The in-game engine is okay, but it's not up to snuff for cutscenes at all. There's so many frame rate issues, clipping issues, texture pop-ins. Like, I'm not a graphics person. Graphics don't usually bother me. Texture pop-ins happen. It's just the way it works. For now, anyway. But it was bad. It was so bad. And usually in a cutscene, especially like the really big cutscenes, they'll use a cinematic engine of some sort, so that you won't deal with that stuff. Like, it's just focused on, let's make these cutscenes look pretty. And they didn't seem to care about making the cutscenes look pretty. And there were a ton of cutscenes early in the game. Now, if you go to play the game, it may not take you 5 to 10 hours to get past this point, because I was like really focused on doing all the side quests in Haven, and stuff like that. So I stayed in this kind of zone for a while where every single flaw was just magnified in my eyes. The other big one that I had a problem with was combat. They took away my ability to hammer the auto attack button when I was out of mana and waiting on cooldowns, which was frustrating to me. I feel like they actually found the worst of both worlds in that now I hold the R2 button. I played this on PS3, primarily because now I can create a save on the Dragon Age Keep and put it on whatever console I want, which is really cool. And then the PS3 always stays in my room, whereas the Xbox 360 moves around a lot. So the PS3, anyway, hold R2, and that's how I auto attack. What's up with that? Like, it's not enough to just watch the auto attacks. I have to watch the auto attacks and hold down a button. Like, if I'm pressing a button, then I'm doing something. If I'm holding a button, I'm not doing anything, but I'm uncomfortable. So that was kind of frustrating. But then, as I started to explore the hinterlands some more, it started to be really cool. I was like, oh, what's over here? Oh, what's over here? Oh, what's over here? It was just like all this exploration and finding things and completing quests, and it was really cool. And it was at that point that I had more than just Cassandra in my party or was wandering around by myself. I had Varric and Solus, and that was the party I ran with through the entire game. And there was the trademark Dragon Age interactions, the snarking at each other. It was great, and I loved it. And I was having so much fun that I stopped noticing the flaws. Pretty sure they were still there, but I stopped noticing them until about 2/3 of the way through the game. And then that same feeling came back. And I think what happened here was it's about this point that they opened up everything all at once. Like, early on, they opened up like 2 or 3 zones, and I went to do all the side quests because I didn't want any of them to go away when I did a story quest. Well, then I did a story quest, and like 10 new zones opened up, and they're all massive, and I wanted to do everything in them, and it took forever. And then other bugs started popping up. For example, my companions stopped snarking at each other, and it was just Solus asking Varric about Corypheus over and over and over. I probably have that dialogue memorized now because they said it so many times and they just kept doing it. And it's like, okay, you already said that, stop it. But they didn't. It was also at this point that they unlocked specializations, and I chose Knight Enchanter because I'd heard that the spirit damage it could do was really good against dragons. Turns out Knight Enchanter is really overpowered. It was at this point that none of the fights were difficult anymore. They were just long and boring. I could just attack with the Spirit Blade, and it did more damage than normal, than any of my other stuff, for every attack. And I could just do it unlimited amount of times. There was no cooldown. It didn't use enough mana to drain my mana. And it would recharge my barrier, so I couldn't take any damage. So there was no challenge in any of the fights anymore. It was boring. And then some other bugs started to pop up. I remember Western Approach, one of the quests out there. An NPC would not show up, so I couldn't do anything. It was very frustrating. Could not complete that quest. And I'm very much a completionist. So not being able to complete that quest, I still haven't been able to complete it because even though they put out a patch to fix a lot of the bugs, they still haven't fixed that one. And no amount of reloading the game or changing zones and coming back would make him appear. Very, very frustrating. So I get to the end of the game, and I get close to the end of the game. Morrigan shows back up. I don't know where she's got a kid now. And the foreshadowing from Dragon Age Origins about her and this kid apparently means nothing anymore because she's like, oh, he's my son. I couldn't possibly do whatever it was I was going to do with him. And it's like, okay, will you at least tell me what you were going to do with him? Nah. And then Flemeth shows back up, Morrigan's mom. She's been in all 3 games now, and she always shows up, does some crazy foreshadowing like, oh, there's going to be creepy stuff, it's going to happen, and I'm probably going to be a part of it, and you're going to be important, and I'm going to be important, and then she disappears, never shows back up, nothing she says means anything. Because, like, you kill her in Dragon Age Origins, and she stops showing up. And then in Dragon Age 2, she comes in and she's like, "Oh, you're the most important person in the world. You're the most important person in Kirkwall for the length of that game, but you barely matter in Dragon Age 3 Inquisition." And then, of course, in Dragon Age Inquisition, she shows up, and she kidnaps Morrigan's kid, and she takes the old god's soul out of his body, and then disappears. Doesn't show up again for the rest of the game. Okay, what you doing there, Flemeth? No idea. So then you get to the end, you fight Corypheus. All of a sudden, you develop the ability to create, like, little tiny rifts that destroy him in a cutscene. Wasn't that good? He dies. Then the conversations after that you can have in the hall of Skyhold, your base, are pretty cool. You learn a lot. And then they did the same thing that they tried to do to fix the Mass Effect 3 endings, where they put up some stills, and then they have some narration saying, "This is what happened to the world after you left, or after the events we've depicted." And it's like, okay. But it's not as bad here because they're not trying to fix anything. The ending isn't terrible like it was in Mass Effect 3. But it's still frustrating because, well, for example, I supported Cassandra to be the new divine of the Chantry, and they chose Leliana. And there's really no indication of how was that decided. Why did I put my support behind anyone if it just didn't matter? Who knows? So it's just kind of weird. And then there was the post-credit scene, which was really confusing and frustrating because it's like, okay, so Flemeth comes back and she kidnaps Morrigan's kid and takes the old god's soul out of him. And then it turns out Flemeth is an old god, an old elven god. And then it turns out that someone else that I won't mention for the moment, even though I've already given so many spoilers away, but whatever, is an old elven god probably, but not definitely. And he comes and just sucks the life out of Flemeth, and she's dead. And you could argue that she's she's come back to life before, so maybe she's going to come back to life again. But she seemed pretty willing to sacrifice her life to give him power. And it's also revealed at this point that he's the one that gave the orb to Corypheus. And there's no explanation of why. It's kind of implied that he couldn't figure out how to work it, maybe. And so he thought Corypheus could figure out how to work it. But he had to know Corypheus was super evil dude and wasn't going to give it back. So it was kind of really stupid. So the post-credit scene was less intriguing and enticing, which I think is what they were going for, and more, what? Why? But overall, the game was really fun for the majority of it. It was just the beginning and the end were kind of weak. And again, BioWare just has done an amazing job in these games with creating culture and politics that feel real. They're not as shallow as you'll see in a lot of other games. It's not like, oh, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys. It's like, okay, well, these people believe these kinds of things and these people believe these kinds of things. They always do a great job with the characters. Not always. Blackwall springs to mind as being a terrible character. But Iron Bull was a really good character. Varric, I love Varric. You gotta love Varric. Cassandra, I think, was actually a more interesting character than maybe some people are giving her credit for. And they even gave you some interesting characters in this game outside of your party, with Cullen and Leliana and the ambassador. I forget her name. Lady Montelier. But they're all great. They're all cool. They're all interesting. And there's a lot of different discussions of different cultures, ways of approaching things, and then there's things that in our world are taboo, and they're like, oh, that's perfectly normal. There was one moment when there's an empress has a lover she's not married to, which is interesting, and that lover is also female. They're two females, and no one cares about that. What they care about is that the lover is an elf, and so there's still some racism going on. So there's like little variations and little interesting things that they do, and this is what fantasy and science fiction is for: is to point out, like, you guys do this thing over here, and it doesn't make any sense. You just do it because you've been doing it. So Bioware does a great job creating a world. They do a great job with the characters. But as the series have gone on, both Mass Effect and Dragon Age, they've introduced more and more bugs into their games because they're doing it faster. The assumption is because EA is making them. More bugs in the games, more graphical limitations. Like, other games are progressing leaps and bounds above what Dragon Age and Mass Effect have done with their graphics. But I think these games are worth playing. I think there's going to be more Dragon Age games set in this universe, probably in a similar time period even, unlike Mass Effect, which is going somewhere completely different. And I think that these games are worth playing, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where they go. I'm looking forward to expansions or new games. And that's about all I have to say. So I hope you all enjoyed this vlog video, and I'd love to hear back from you. If you have any comments or questions, just put them in the comments section of this video, and I'll try and get back to you, whether it be comments, comment replies, or maybe a video reply. So thanks for your time. Have a great day.